Hate is a pretty strong word, but it's probably a word that we hear pretty much every day. But why do people experience hatred, and what can psychology tell us about hatred? What's up guys, welcome to another week's episode of Get Psyched, and this week we're going to be looking at the psychology of hate. So the first question to ask exactly is, why do we hate? Hate is complex, and in today's society it's absolutely everywhere. But what exactly can psychology tell us about why people experience hatred and why they hate? Well, psychological research has shown time and time again that we hate things that are actually different from us. In psychology there's a theory called the in-group out-group theory, and this illustrates that when someone or in an out-group or the out-group themselves does something that we don't like, we turn to our in-group for survival. And theorists behind the in-group out-group theory state that we actually have two separate factors that cause us to experience hatred. Those two factors are love and aggression. We have love for our in-group, but we might experience aggression towards the out-group. Now we can maybe think of a number of different examples as to where we can see the in-group out-group theory be applicable. Now, stereotypically speaking, nationalism has connotations of hatred towards out-groups. Or sometimes there are connotations that when somebody loves their country, it automatically means that they hate immigrants, for example. Now, under no circumstances am I saying that this is always the case, that people who are nationalists or people who love their country automatically hate people in out-groups or hate immigrants. Absolutely not am I saying this. I'm not saying that that is applicable to 100% of people. And using that really general stereotypical example, we can start to understand a little bit more about the in-group out-group bias and how people can start to experience hatred and actually hate on other people. One of the other key characteristics as to why people hate, psychology has shown, is that they actually fear something within themselves. Clinical psychologist Dana Haran states that people hate things that they fear about themselves. We can understand this a little bit better when we look at Freud and projection. Projection is basically where we reject the things that we don't like about ourselves. And we can start to understand this a little bit better when we think about people who hate things that other people do that might be high achieving. People who are successful academically or who start their own business, start a successful business, might experience hatred from other people. Now, people might actually hate on somebody who started their own successful business because it instills that fear in them that they're afraid of leaving their job and committing to the sacrifices that it takes to start and run a successful business. Another really good example of this are successful sports athletes, for example. Especially athletes at the very height of their game, often whenever they get the ball, if they're playing football or they're playing basketball or something, we'll hear booing from the crowd. They're experiencing hatred because they're at the very top of their game. Now, if we're again looking at a stereotypical example, that hatred could be coming from the fact that these fans or these individuals have a fear in themselves that what it would take for them to be at that level is a massive amount of sacrifice and dedication. Now that's just a theory, but it does give us an example or an understanding a little bit about the psychology of hate and actually where hate comes from. Hate has a lot of its foundations in fear. Fear of ourselves, fear of change, fear of sacrifice, fear of outgroups. All of that fear has a lot to do with people extrovertly experiencing and projecting hatred. Another example, and perhaps an applicable example in today's day and age, is people who hate asylum seekers. Now, that hatred might be stemming from the fact that they fear the vulnerability in their job. They fear that the individual, the asylum seeker coming to their country, might actually be better at their job than them, and so they fear losing their job. That fear projects into that hatred, that externalization of that hatred. Now, once again, I'm not saying that this is the case with absolutely everybody, but what I am saying is that we can understand a little bit about the psychology of hate and where actually hate comes from by understanding a little bit about the foundations of fear. Another reason as to why people might experience hate or feel hatred towards others or other groups is that they're having challenges with their own identity. Overcoming Destructive Anger is a book written by Bernard Golden. And Golden states that hatred or expressing hatred is actually a valuable characteristic in creating our identity within our own group. For example, as part of our identity and our membership within our group, we might have to have hatred for the out-group. Now, I live in Glasgow in Scotland, and one of the key examples of this where part of the identity of your in-group is the fact that you hate the out-group is with football. Celtic and Rangers are two rival football teams in Glasgow, in part, especially for the extreme fans, is that part of the identity is not only that they love Celtic or Rangers, but the fact that they hate the other team, either Celtic or Rangers. Now, once again, I'm not being generalistic and I'm making sure that I get this across. This is absolutely not the case with everybody. There are plenty of Celtic fans who get on with Rangers fans and plenty of Rangers fans who get on with Celtic fans. But there are some extreme examples where membership of the in-group, either Celtic or Rangers, is the fact that they hate the out-group. And the book written by Golden kind of illustrates this, that the fact that our in-group membership is actually attributed to the hatred that we have for others. Once again, when we're thinking about the foundation of fear, and we're thinking about this book written by Golden, one of the things he states is that having hatred for others in order to establish our identity within our in-group stops us from feeling the vulnerability of having to establish our own singular identity. Once again, we can be fearful of the challenges that come with creating our own individual identity, and so we stick and connect with the in-group identity because that's much stronger, that's already established, and we know what that is. And if that means that we're required to hate the out-group, then that's what we'll do. So once again, we can start to understand a little bit more about the psychology of hate and where hate comes from based on that foundation of fear. One of the other factors that's really important that we understand as to why people hate is to think about cultural factors. In large, I think we actually need to consider the bigger picture here too. We live in a society of war and fighting, a society of competition for the betterment of the self and the betterment of the self's in-group. As a result, cultural factors really do have a role to play here, I feel. We struggle to express ourselves as being vulnerable because we fear the fact that we're going to be taken advantage of by the enemy. That cultural factor, that instilling of attack and aggression and competitiveness and one-on-one is massive when it comes to the psychology of hate and why the individual in society hates other people or hates out-groups. So how exactly do we combat against the hatred that we might be experiencing and feeling? Well, the first tip here is to express and experience self-compassion. Accept everything about yourself, both the good and the bad. When there are things about ourselves that we don't like, we attack individuals who portray the same characteristics as a defense mechanism so that we don't have to attack ourselves. So if we experience self-compassion for the whole self, then we can start to see people as separate from us. We can start to express and experience compassion for others for characteristics and things that used to cause us hatred towards them. It all comes from that sense of self-compassion. If you can have compassion for the aspects of yourself that you're both fearful of and that you hate, and as a result project onto other people, you can start to have compassion for others as well. One of the things that we need to understand here is that we learn compassion just like we learn hatred. These are both learned behaviors, and so in part, one of the key things is we have to have self-awareness and we also have to have education. Hate is primarily driven by fear. That's one of the things that I really want to get across in this video. And some of the most challenging things that you have to do in order to overcome that hatred and overcome that fear is to experience that vulnerability. Face the fear of feeling vulnerable. Face the fear of your identity or lack of identity. Face the fear of confronting the things that you like least about yourself. And show compassion to all of this. Start there and begin a process of tolerance and compassion rather than fear and hatred. Guys, thanks so much for watching this week's episode of Get Psyched. We've been looking at the psychology of hatred, and we've been looking at how the foundation of fear can contribute to understanding hatred, and we've been looking at some psychological research and what some psychologists say about hatred. Once again, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you've been enjoying Get Psyched, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. You can hit that little bell next to it and you'll get weekly reminders every time I upload, and hopefully catch you next week.